I'm a huge fan of 3D dimensional die cuts, and today I have a beautiful card featuring the Into the Blooms Pansies from Papertrey Ink. I'm going to show you how I did this ink blending to get a really beautiful 3D flower for my card today. Here's a look at the Into the Blooms Pansies. I did die cut both the bud and the pansy. We're going to do some ink blending onto the largest one. Now I did mimic the same coloring on the two buds that I added to my card, so I only showed you one of the largest pansy and how I ink blended that one. I add my die cuts to a Cricut mat. It's the easiest way for me to be able to do ink blending. It kind of just holds each of these petals in place. I'm starting with my pink color, which is going to be Party Dress from Catherine Pooler. All of the inks are from Catherine Pooler Ink. I was more heavy-handed towards the center of this petal. This is actually going to go in the back of my die cut, so I'm adding just one color and adding that one color as I continue on through all of these petals. I'll continue to increase the colors that I'm adding, and that is what's going to give this a realistic appearance. So we're going to start again using that Party Dress ink. This time I'm going to add a second color, and that's going to be the Apricot, which is a beautiful, beautiful peachy orange color. And I'm using my larger blending brushes at this point. So for all but one of the colors, I do use my larger blending brushes. These are from Amazon. They're easy to find. Just look up blending brushes and you can find them there. I'm going to go around the edges of all of the petals, making sure to cover up any of that white space. And that this looks really bright, and you're going to notice that the color is going to not only dry back just a little bit, but I'm also going to do a few additions to the ink blending that's going to soften up some of this color. Here we have Whipped Honey, and I'm going to start with the bottom portion. I have this really small blending brush right here, and I'm going to add a little bit of that Whipped Honey, and then we're going to add that Apricot. So again, I'm repeating the same colors, just adding a new one with each of the petals, being a little bit more heavy-handed with one color over the other. We're going to come in with that Party Dress again. And then I'm going to get a small blending brush, and I want to add just a little bit of the Terracotta. Now that Terracotta ink pad actually was a little bit more juicy than some of my other ones. So it does appear that it's going to be like really dominant in dark, but you'll see in the final pictures that it actually does dry back and soften up. So I'll go back over that because it is a little bit dark with that Party Dress. And then we'll move on to our next petal, and that's going to be the bottom petal. There we go. I'm going to start with that Terracotta. I thought I could use what was on my brush, but I do end up going back into the ink pad because I did want a little bit more intense color. So you see on this petal, I'm adding a much heavier hand of this Terracotta. I'll bring in a little bit of that Whipped Honey and add some of that yellow. Add a little bit to the right side. And then I'll add that Party Dress again, giving a little bit of that pink tone to the yellow. So it'll actually be more of an orange, but it will have a little bit of a pink tone to it, which is going to blend with the rest of the colors from the other petals. So adding each of the layers together, it is going to look a lot more cohesive than it does as I'm ink blending right now, which is one of the things that I really wanted to share, is that, you know, once you start layering these up, it really does does begin to come together, and you're going to find out that because you repeated the colors throughout the petals, that it blends together, but it also creates a more unique looking pansy. A lot of pansies are just two colors, a more intense center, and then the outside layers have just one other color. But there are some pansies that I believe may be hybrid pansies that are going to have a little bit more vibrancy to the color and more different color combinations. That background layer, I was very light-handed with the apricot and the party dress because, again, only an 1/8 inch of that bottom layer or the solid layer is going to show. I'm going to finish off with this center, and again repeating all of the same colors. There is a little heart that I have on that mat, and that is going to be the center for the flower, and I'm going to use the party dress to color that one up. But first I'm going to add a little bit of that terracotta, go over it again with that party dress. So I'm making sure that I'm adding that pink to each of the layers, trying to make sure that I have a pretty even application of it so that it will tie everything together. This is where the color starts softening up a little bit, so I'm going to use my Distress water sprayer, and I'm going to spray this with water. Instead of lifting it up with a paper towel or with a microfiber cloth, I'm just going to dry it. I'll use some white gouache and a fan brush, and I'm going to just spatter some of that white gouache over each of the petals, being super heavy-handed with this. Again, this is going to soften things up. Now this one's going to look like it's a hot mess. I'm starting off with sea glass for my leaf, and I used the same colors on the other leaves that were on the buds. So I started with this sea glass and one of these small blending brushes. Hindsight, I probably should have used my bigger blending brush, but you'll see that it all evens out anyway. And then there's this turquoise green color that is called Sea Breeze, I believe, and I added that to the bottom and to some of the sides of this leaf. I'll do the same thing, be really heavy with the water, use my heat tool to dry it, and then of course I'm going to do the same spatters onto the leaf. And then we're going to start building our flower. So to add dimension, I'm going to use foam tape. I do have this 1/4 inch foam tape from scrapbook.com. These back layers, these were the first two that I created. So the one on the left is just the party dress. The one on the right has the party dress and the apricot. I'm going to add this foam tape to the back of the base layer, which is that solid piece. And then I'll kind of overlap the petals behind it. So I'll start with the one on the left, and you see I'm leaving probably about a 1/4 inch border, and then I'll overlap the second one, and you can see right there how the colors are starting to blend and come together. This is going to be the bottom leaf. Again, adding that foam tape, and I'll leave about an 1/8 inch border from that bottom layer, so I'm moving that more towards the center to make sure that I have that base layer peeking out just a tad. I'll add foam tape to this one, this petal, which is going to go on the left hand side, and then you see the center petal. Because there is foam tape on the bottom and the left side, and the right side doesn't have its own petal layer, I'm only going to add foam tape to the right side of that centerpiece. Now I'm going to put it on the wrong side to start with. I'm like, wait, no, that's the wrong side. So I'm going to add it to the right side, and then I'll add glue to the other two petals, which are going to lay on the ones that I've already popped up with foam tape. First, I'm going to add a little bit of black detail using a Copic pen that I have. Some pansies have black streaks through them, and so for mine today I went ahead and added that detail to the pansy. And now we're going to adhere it, and we'll add our centerpiece. Now the heart looks like it should be going in the right direction with the curves on the upside of this final layer, but it goes upside down. So I looked at a couple of samples just to make sure that I had it going in the right direction. You can put it in whatever direction you want to, but all the samples that I looked at showed it more in an upside down orientation. And look at how beautiful that pansy is. It's just full of dimension and color, and I don't know, I just think that these types of dies are just amazing, especially for spring and summer cards. I'm going to add a little bit of Nuvo Mountain Dew, which is kind of like a glossy accents, to that center heart, and then we're going to move on to our sentiment. So I do have this Shapeshifter oval, which is from Papertrey Ink. It's an older product that's not available right now. Sometimes they bring some of these items back, so you can always check back and see if they're available. I die cut it from white cardstock. I've added a sentiment that is, again, it's called A Year of Psalms. This is an older psalm. It's not available any longer, but they do have new ones that have come out over the last 2 months that would work perfectly with this as well. I'm using that Apricot ink. I've added my sentiment more towards the top of that oval because I do know that I'm going to add that larger pansy to the bottom left along with the large leaves. I'm going to do a little bit of hot foiling with a plate called Ornate Swirls. This is part of the new release. I started by adding my foil plate. I added my foil pretty side down, added my cardstock over the top, which is that pink cardstock. It's called Raspberry Fizz, which is a Papertrey Ink paper. It didn't foil as well as my hammer mill foils. It's not quite as smooth, so I didn't get the finish that I normally get, but I did get a good enough finish that I thought that it still made a beautiful background. I am going to come back to this, and I am going to try it with my hammer mill, and I think that I'll get a much better impression. I did create a hinge and added my foil underneath that hinge. That just helps me get full coverage. And because there are some spots where I just didn't get the foiling on this, I am going to trim this down. So I'm going to trim it down to 5 1/4 by 4 inches. I'll take a 1/4 inch off the bottom, which is the 5 1/2 inch side, and then I'm going to take an 1/8 inch off the left and the right side just to make sure that each of the sides pretty much matches. If I would have taken it off of one side and not the other, then it wouldn't have been centered. I'm going to add some Elizabeth Craft Designs double-sided tape. There was a little piece on the corner that kind of broke away, and I wanted to make sure that it stayed together. So using this type of tape rather than using my wet glue just worked a little bit better. I'll remove the release paper. I do have a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch top folding card base, and I'm going to center this on top. I did use I think it's called Opal. This is it's for the Gemini foil press, and I did use, it's not a silver, it looks like it's silver, but it actually is more of an opal finish. And that was the hot foil that I used. And then I'm going to add some wet glue to the back of my sentiment, and I'm going to center that onto my hot foiled layer. And now we're going to add our pansy. So I'll start with the largest pansy, And I'm going to just use my wet glue to adhere it to the bottom left-hand corner, making sure I have it in an orientation where you can see the majority of my sentiment. Now it does hang off the side, so I am going to have to either make or use a little bit bigger of an envelope for this. I'm going to add one leaf, and it's going to fill that white space at the bottom. So now you can see that my sentiment looks a lot more centered because I did fill in that white space at the bottom. I knew I was going to add that second leaf, and then I'm going to tuck this one underneath on the left side, and we'll bring in both of the buds that I created. Aren't they pretty? Just so pretty. I created two of them. I'm going to add them over in that upper right hand corner, and then I did off camera die cut the stems. I just did some partial die cutting, so the stems are really long and I only needed short pieces, so I just took some scrap paper and used those dies to cut the stems so they would fit perfectly. I didn't add any foam tape to the stems. I'm just going to tuck them, making sure that I crisscross the stems. So this one is going to cross over the one that's on the left, and then I'll use a pair of scissors and I'm just going to trim that back, making sure that the stems don't go past my hot foil layer. And once I finish with this, that will complete my card for today. I want to thank you so much for joining me. I hope that this gave you some nice thoughts on how to do some ink blending for layers on these beautiful die cuts. All of the products that are available from Papertrey Ink are linked in the description box below. If you have any questions, please make sure to leave me a comment. Until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day. Thanks so much for joining me.